and welcome to this video tutorial on how to use Excel PowerPivot. What you're looking at is Microsoft Northwind Traders database. If you have Microsoft Access, then you can download this database easily by opening Access 2016 and clicking the Northwind Traders template. You can then export the data to Excel by clicking the External Data tab and clicking the Excel Export icon. Then just follow the Export Data Wizard's export steps. Alternatively, you can download the database from GitHub or from my OneDrive link. Once you have some sample data in Excel, you and I can get to work. As you can see, I have Northwind Traders demographic customer data. My immediate objective is to take this data and place the data into PowerPivot. Naturally, like most things in IT, there are two ways to achieve this. One, open another workbook and click PowerPivot, then click Manage icon. Next, click the From Other Sources icon. A window appears, scroll down, and under Text Files, select Import Excel File. Click Next. We're then asked to choose the file we want to use. To do so, click the Browse button and navigate to the data file. Select the file and click OK to return to the table Import Wizard. Next, click to use first row as column header. You can then click Test Connection button. Assuming all is OK, we can move on, but first make a mental note of the friendly connection name. If you wish, you can change the name to something that suits you and your naming preference. Let's click Next and move on. The window refreshes and we have the ability to preview the table by clicking the Preview and Filter button. I'll click this. A new window opens to display inbound data. One thing is worth checking, particularly if you haven't previously scrubbed the data, and that's to look for blank rows. I'll click the column arrowhead pointing down, and in the new window scroll down and check whether the blank rows tick box is ticked. If so, remove the tick. If you import blank rows, your PowerPivot table will report faults. It's worth noting, if you have a large data table, you won't see all the data items. You can click the URL for Not All Items Shown to get some help if this concerns you. Let's proceed by clicking OK. Take a look at the table friendly name. If you're unhappy with the name, this is an opportunity for you to change the worksheet name to something that you will be happy with. To do so, click the row and rename. I'm going to name the worksheet Northwind Customers. We can now move on by clicking Finish. If all is well, the window updates to report import success. Assuming you have been successful, you can proceed to click Close. The second method is to open the workbook holding your data that you want to use with PowerPivot. That's if you haven't already opened the workbook. Once you have the data you want to work with, click the PowerPivot tab and click the Add to Model icon. Note, PowerPivot opens and the table is named Table 1. Just like worksheets, you can rename this if you so wish. It's best practice to name the table to something that suits your naming preference rather than accept default names. Note, to the right there is a link icon. This link icon shows us the data is linked to your workbook sheet. To summarize, the other method, the first method, is to click the PowerPivot tab, then click Manage icon. Once the data sheet loads into PowerPivot, click the From Other Sources icon and then scroll down to select the import option you want to utilize, for example, an Excel file. Let's move on to saving our work. You cannot save just the PowerPivot table model or just the worksheet. When you click Save, you automatically save both the PowerPivot model and the Excel workbook. If you wish to save your work, you can do so by clicking the Save icon. Look at the top left of the screen above the File menu, name. You will see the Save icon. Click that. Alternatively, you can click File menu and choose Save As. Either way, you will revert back to Excel. If you want to return to PowerPivot, click the Manage icon. In this section, I'm going to briefly talk about how you can utilize PowerPivot or Power Query in the same way you can make use of an Excel workbook you may wish to analyze. The first method I'm going to show you will require me to use a query I previously created. This requires me to first click Excel's PowerPivot tab, then Manage. When the new window query opens, I click Get External Data icon and select from Other Source. I scroll down and under Text Files I click Excel File option and click Next. A new window opens and I'm required to browse and locate the file I want to use. I select the table sales region and click OK. Next I test the connection. Assuming all is OK, I click the Use First Row as Column Headers tick box because as a query I know the first table row lists table headers. I click Next. The window shows me all the sheets available to me in the workbook. I'm going to select UK, then click Preview and Filter. The window shows me all the orders for the UK. I click OK, then I click Finish. A new window appears and hopefully like me, your import shows success. Assuming all is OK, I click Close. If you used external data source, you might see security warnings regarding enabling data links. Assuming you are happy to do so, and you probably are because you previously created a data source table, then click Enable. If the PowerPivot table was closed due to security warnings, click Manage icon. The pivot table opens. Look at the bottom of the table and you will see the table you just added. I won't save this as I'm going to demonstrate a second method. The second method, I open the Power Query directly and go directly to PowerPivot and simply click Add to Data Model icon under the PowerPivot tab. Excel launches PowerPivot. I know I'm going to want to be working with this PowerPivot in the future, so I'm going to save this. I simply save this just like I would any other workbook. I click File and click Save As. Note the saved type as an Excel workbook. I'm going to change the name by adding DM to the start of the file name. DM stands for Data Model. To summarize, there are two methods. One, open Excel workbooks regardless of whether they are Power Queries we previously created or an external data source that exists in Excel format. The first method, I can open the workbook with the data I want to utilize, then click Add to Data Model and add it to the data model. The alternative is to open Workbook and under the PowerPivot Query tab, click Manage, then retrieve data as external data. This section I will cover data relationships. I'll begin with a brief explanation of what data relationships are. Let's begin by reviewing the two tables I have in Northwind Data Model. The source table, Customers, has a number of columns, one of which is Company. The order table contains company orders. Let's assume I like to know which company ordered what. To be able to achieve this, I need to create a relationship between the two tables. If you're familiar with Excel's VLOOKUP function, you will understand data relationships. Like most relationships, there are rules. The first one being you can only have one relationship between tables. For example, company name in the customer table links to company name in the orders table. I couldn't then go on to create a link to the employee placing the order. The next rule is one relationship for a source column. What does that mean? If I have a source table listing company names and another table listing company names, I cannot create a relationship with a second table listing company names. Let me rephrase that. The source table column can have only one relationship with the second table. The next rule. The lookup column we seek to integrate must hold unique values in the related table. This makes data relationships different to Excel VLOOKUP function. What do I mean by that? Excel VLOOKUP allows columns to hold multiple values. Using VLOOKUP, I can set the function to look for the first occasion a value occurs, for example a date, whereas a data relationship, I cannot do this if the value held in the column aren't unique. Moving on to the next rule, data types must be compatible. For example, postcode's data type may be set to text or numbers. You cannot have both. This means text and text or numbers and numbers. You cannot have a column with mixed data types. One more important rule. A column can only have a single relationship. This means no composite keys. Let me expand on that. Some databases may not have a unique column. For example, you may have a customer number and an order date number and items ordered. Together, these data items create uniqueness in the table, but they utilize multiple columns. This type of unique key is called a composite key. This means the source table column has one relationship only with a related table column. If the related table uses composite keys, you should seek professional advice and assistance. As you can see, I'm using Northwind Workbook with two worksheets. My objective is to relate these two worksheets to my data model. There are two methods to achieve this. One, I can use the diagram model. One, open PowerPivot, and in the Home tab, I click the diagram view icon. The two tables are shown. I want to view all the columns in the table. To do that, I select the table by left-clicking the table. I move the mouse cursor over the corner, and when the mouse cursor changes to a two-headed icon, I press and hold the left mouse button and drag the table to expand the size. I can also move the table to another location using the same technique. You might be thinking this functionality isn't of much use. I agree, when there are just two tables, but if you're looking with 20 tables, this capability comes into its own. Next, I identify the source table column I want to link to the related table. I left-click the source company column, and once highlighted, holding the left mouse button down, I drag the mouse cursor over to the related table column I want to link to. In my example, as I drag the mouse cursor across, I draw a line to link to the order ID column. Once I've reached the destination, the target column is highlighted. I know that's my chosen column, so I release the mouse button. The tables now show a line linking the two tables. If I click the link line with the arrowhead pointing down, I open Edit Relationship window. This window is the second method to configure a relationship I mentioned a moment ago. I don't want to do this. I want to show you how to set up a relationship from scratch using Edit Relationship method, so I'll come back to this. If the related table has blanks, you might see an error message. Regrettably, the error message doesn't really provide you with a descriptive solution. Click the Data View icon. Scroll down the Orders table. I can see a blank line. Alternatively, I can left-click the column arrowhead pointing down. A sub-menu window opens. I scroll down, and at the bottom I see blanks box ticked. Sadly, removing the tick from the box won't resolve the issue. Using PowerPivot, I'm unable to shape the data here as I can in Power Query. I can only configure calculations and create relationships. I could return to Power Query and make the necessary amendments. However, I'm going to show you how to do this in PowerPivot. First, I delete the table by clicking the Table tab to mark it as active, then right-click and in the sub-menu I choose Delete. I will see a warning message requesting me to confirm my desire to delete the table. I click OK. Now the table is removed, I click Get External Data. I browse to select the Excel file I want to use. Next I click Use Column Header Box to place a tick in the box. Then I click Test Connection. Assuming all is OK, I click Next. I click Preview and Filter button. I've reached an important stage regarding my objective to remove blanks. I left click the column header arrow head pointing down and scroll down to the blank tick box. I click the box to remove the blanks. I then click OK. Let's assume for a moment I wanted to filter the data further. For example, let's say I wanted to filter by company or orders over a certain value or a date range. I can do so at this stage. Let's assume we're happy with just removing the blank table rows. I'll move on by clicking OK. I can rename the table if I so choose. I can click Preview and Filter button. Assuming I'm happy with my filter options, I click Finish. I'll probably see an error message. Assuming this is OK, I click OK. Next, a window appears, hopefully reporting success. The text will say how many records have been pulled. You should see a numerical difference as blank records are no longer being pulled in. I click Close and return to the diagram view. If I repeat the earlier steps to link the source and the related tables, I shouldn't get an error message. Let's take a look at the bottom window and you'll see a slider. Moving this enlarges or decreases table size. If I click the display grid icon, I return to data view. If I click the diagram icon, I return to diagram view. Click the relationships line and you will see the selected table columns have a highlighted rim around the column name indicating the table column relationships. I'm going to delete the relationships. I click the line link to make this active and right click and choose Delete from the sub menu. I'm now going to show you the second method. Click the Design tab and click Create Relationship icon. A window appears. It's the same window we saw earlier. If you had a related table actively selected earlier, this table will be listed as the source table. No problem switching, simply using the drop down. Select the source table you wish to use. Do the same for the related table. Next, from the source table, select the column you want to link to the related table column. Repeat for the related table. The chosen column should be highlighted. If you're happy, click OK. Either way achieves exactly the same outcome. This video section will illustrate how you can add other databases, for example, Microsoft Azure, Excel, SQL Server, to name a few, to a PowerPivot query. Firstly, I open PowerPivot and click Manage icon. The PowerPivot window opens. If I click Get External Data icon, I can see a number of options such as From Database, From Data Services, From Other Services, From Existing Services. I'll choose From Database and select From Access. This opens up a new window. I now need to browse and find my chosen Access database. Next, I'm going to test the connection by clicking the button. As the connection passed, I know I can ignore Provide Database Logon credentials such as username and password. I'm good to click Next. The following window asks me whether I wish to write a query or select a table and views. I'm wanting to import tables, so I leave the table radio button active and click Next. The next window opens. It's simply a question of selecting the tables I want. In this case, even more simple than usual, as there is only one table to choose from. Once again, I'll rename the table to something users might find more descriptive, but I'm happy with the current table name, so I'll leave that as is. Next, I'm going to click the Preview and Filter button. Not particularly necessary given I already know what's in the table, but it's good practice to always confirm I haven't made a selection error. Besides, it's quick, and this would save me considerable time if I had made a mistake and needed to undo my blunder. Another reason for verifying the table's content before proceeding is to confirm the table has no duplicate records. PowerPivot requires the lookup column to not hold duplicates, and I should remind you, no composite keys. A composite key example would be a combination of columns, such as a column for a town name that's linked to a zip code column table. In other words, a composite key in a table can be used to uniquely identify each row in the table that has a link to another or more tables. This isn't an option for us when we use PowerPivot. PowerPivot requires unique column lookup. I'm going to click OK to move on, then click Finish. All being well, I should see Success message. As I do, I can click Close. Regardless of which database we use to bring data into Excel, the data import data layout format will always look like this. In other words, it's not easy to identify whether data comes from SQL or Access or some other database format. My next requirement is to relate the postcode table to my data model. To achieve this, I click PowerPivot Diagram, New Icon. I reposition my tables to enable me to easily see the columns I want to use to build table relationships. It's worth repeating my earlier comment. It's not easy to distinguish table source data. All the tables look the same. The only table that sort of indicates a difference is the North Wind customer list. This table has a link chain icon. This table is linked to an Excel workbook. Because the table is linked to Excel, I'm provided with an extra tab. For example, I can edit the source table by clicking the Go to Excel icon. This immediately returns me to Excel. The data model is fine as it is. However, data models you might be working with in the future just might hold unnecessary data columns for your particular query requirements. This future scenario is likely, so I'm going to show you how you can amend tables to show only the columns you need. There are two possibilities to solving this. One method is to delete the column. This is an extreme step, as you just might need to use the column in the future. If the column contains no data at all, then it's fair to assume future use is unlikely, so column deletion may be your best option. The second method is to hide the column. Hiding the column retains the column and has an advantage if you wish to reinstate the column. The second benefit is your users won't see the column. To do this, I click the email column header in the Northwind customer list table to mark the column as my active choice. Next, I right click, then in the submenu, I choose Hide from Client Tools. If you wish to view hidden columns, click the Show Hidden icon under the Home tab. The column remains grayed out. Let's assume I prefer to delete a column instead. I click the Order tab and choose Taxes. This column shows no value, and I'm only illustrating the delete column function. I repeat the same procedure to mark the column as my active choice, and in the drop-down side menu I choose Delete the column. You will see a permanent deletion warning message. I'm happy to delete, so I click OK. You may be thinking, why did I switch tables to illustrate column deletion? The Northwind customer list is linked to Excel Workbook. What I'm really doing is reshaping a query, so I suggest you might like to consider creating another workbook and use the workbook to pull the data into your data model. Doing so retains the format and gives you a clean backup. I'd like to show you one or two additional functions. Tip 1. makes the date display more relevant. For example, in the Excel orders table, the table is shown in short format. Yet, in the query, the data is displayed in long format, in other words, date and time. Click the Home tab and look for Format with drop-down arrowhead. Click that and make your choice, in my case, short date format. Remember, we cannot edit column format itself, but we can change the column format display. Another feature is automated data update. For example, if I change Northwind Customer List Excel worksheet, I may want my query to automatically update to reflect the changes in Power Query. I can do this by choosing Northwind Customer List and then click the linked table tab. I then click Update Mode icon and confirm Update Mode is set to automatic. If I didn't want this function, I can set the mode to manual. Let's take a look at the company column header in Northwind Customer table. If I look carefully, I can see a link type icon. This indicates this column is linked to another table column. I can confirm table relationships by switching to Diagram View. You may have noticed the table bottom contains empty rows, yet we know there is more table data. This empty area is called the calculation area. I can switch that off by clicking the calculation area button to show more data. Alternatively, I can just scroll down to view the data. In a later video, I'll show you how to make use of the calculation area. I'm happy with the way my data model is now looking for my users, so this ends this video chapter. The next section covers enhancing pivot tables and pivot charts with PowerPivot. I look forward to working with you in that section.